All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome to another edition of Dada Friday lecture series. I want to, first and foremost, I want to thank the Speakers Committee, whom without their continued support, these Friday lectures would not be possible. Today, we have with us a artist who is near and dear to my heart. This is Tampa-based artist Selina Roman. Roman received her Master's of Fine Arts degree from the University of South Florida in 2013. She has participated in residencies with the Visual Artists Network and Diaspora Vibe Cultural Arts Incubator. Her work is in the collection of the John and Mabel Ringling Museum of Art in Sarasota, the Lipa Ratner Museum of Art in Tarpon Springs, Hillsborough Community College, as well as numerous private collections. Roman has exhibited nationally at institutions such as the Ringling Museum of Art in Sarasota, Kenyon College in Ohio, and internationally at Edna Manley College of Visual and Performing Arts in Kingston, Jamaica, and Universidad del Sagrado Corazon in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Her work was also featured at Brighton Photo Fringe in the United Kingdom during the 2016 Brighton Photo Biennial. In 2017, she received a Hillsborough County Artist Grant and has been invited to participate in Review Santa Fe. She currently teaches visual art and photography courses at the University of Tampa, Hillsborough Community College, and the Art Institute of Tampa. Her work explores ideas of femininity, perception, liminality, memory, place, and how the invisible offers more answers than what is visible. Her work was also recently included in a billboard campaign referred to as Come to Your Census for the national 2020 census this year, and is also currently on view at the Ringling Museum of Art in Sarasota, Florida, in the museum exhibition Being Seen. So without further ado, please welcome one of my favorite photographers and good friend, Selina Roman.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. And thank you, Emily, for bringing me into the Webster community. I appreciate it. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here. And voila. So hi, everyone. I wanted to start with this. I just felt like it would kind of like jolt everybody out of whatever election COVID slumber we've been in. But I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about how my work has evolved over time, how I got to this point, creating an image like this. And this is from my series, Please Disturb, where I've invited people into a motel room that I've rented for a few days, and we make photos together. But I promise to circle back to this image and why I'm doing this. Alrighty. So here we go. So I grew up an 80s, 90s kid. And so, thinking about my work and all the things that might have influenced me, things that I took for granted, but then realized, oh, they've had an impact on my work or just how I've thought about things or the world. I'm a Florida native, grew up in Central Florida. I grew up in a rural part of Florida, had a horse at one point and rode. And then I moved to the city of Tampa. And, Florida has had a huge impact on me, the way I think about things. The cartoons I watch, namely Gem, if any of you are fans or have heard about it. It was an 80s cartoon that the lead character was two different people. If she touched her earrings, she became a different person. I think for kids, that idea of transformation or being someone else is always, in the age of Transformers, right? Very, very addicting. A very great way to think about leaving your current situation. And so it was a very novella or soap opera type cartoon that when I look back now, I think it was probably too advanced for like fourth graders or fifth graders. But the colors, the fashion design that was involved, all of that, the sparkle, the glitter, all of that definitely has fed into my current studio practice. So, um, so loving fashion, growing up as a kid in Florida, reading Star Magazine, which was this tabloid that you would get in the, checkout lane of the grocery store, and it would have like what big poofy dresses the celebrities were wearing. So of course, celebrities like Cher were, just blew my mind seeing these kinds of clothes, following designers like Bob Mackie. So if you guys haven't figured it out already, I wanted to be a fashion designer when I was little. I had sketchbooks, I would draw. I thought that's what I really wanted to be. And so it's design has kept up in my life for a while. But then, of course, as a kid, um, you know, you rifle around families' houses looking for porn. Um, and so, not only was I looking at Bob Mackie in fashion, me and my cousins were, rifling through the house looking for the stash of porn, basically. And, you know, I think about it now and I think about, kids my age or yeah, kids that were my age, doing that. And it seems like, oh, I can't believe I did that. But we were curious. We knew it was something we weren't supposed to look at, right? This idea of the taboo of not looking at something. What is nudity or nakedness? It's bad, it's wrong. And so, of course, I was just totally fascinated by it. This is so, um, it's so removed, right, from childhood, but in a sense, it was a big part of my childhood. So, finding those magazines, it felt like the best thing I can compare it to is like the Goonies and finding the treasure when you found the magazines and of course putting them back so it didn't look like they were moved. So all right, let's leave porn. And of course, growing up in Florida, we have Florida Man. I mean, just the headlines, right? Um, Growing up knowing that where you live is so strange and such an outlier, that to me, growing up here, strange is normal. It's not strange. This is just what it is. Um, Serial killers, Ted Bundy, and oops, and Eileen Warnos. And so just this idea of like the humidity here and the weather and how it draws people in, this kind of sticky underbelly of life that's both beautiful and dangerous. All those things just constantly working in the back of, my mind. And then, of course, as a kid, um, reading fashion, again, loving design, color. Um, and I was aware at the time too that, and we'll get to this later, that these figures or these people in the magazines didn't look like me, didn't have my body size, for example. But as a kid, that didn't matter. I still loved, I still love this. My brain wasn't processing it fully, really what I was looking at. I just loved the surface, basically. And so um a big thing, kind of, a lot more serious than fashion, um, the Gulf War. And the Gulf War as a kid changed my mindset on things as far as like what I thought I wanted to be when I grew up. And I fell in love with writing. During the Gulf War, I wrote a letter to the editor of my local paper about it. And I still have the clipping, though I don't agree with my former self on my thoughts on the war. Um, and so that changed my life. And I actually became a newspaper reporter. And I did journalism throughout middle school, high school, college, and was a professional newspaper reporter in Sarasota, Florida for, the better part of like 3 to 4 years. But journalism's like dog years. And so that 3 to 4 years felt like 21 years. Um, and so I still love writing, but I fell out of it. Um, and going back to, again, these images that I saw as a kid and how I feel like they've crept back up in my most recent works. This is an ad from the 1992 April 100th anniversary issue of Vogue magazine. And it says women should be quiet, composed, obedient, grateful, modest, respectful, submissive, and very, very serious. And was a counter image to this in the ad, and it was a woman in a baseball bat, holding a baseball bat with a baseball cap on, looking very rebellious, very American. And so again, this brand showing two different cultures, two different ideas of what it means to be a woman. Just very powerful imagery to see. And so fast forward, after journalism, I moved to Miami, Florida, thinking I wanted to become a fashion designer, but realized very quickly I didn't like sewing. I didn't like those intricacies of fashion design. But what I really loved was documenting it. And so I apprenticed with a local designer, Case Armstrong over here on the right. And I started documenting her working in her studio on fashion shoots. And I just realized I love this. And it was, I felt guilty for leaving journalism because that had such an impact, a direct impact. Every day you were influencing something, reporting on something. So I did have guilt when I left journalism to do more artistic pursuits. But that aside, I had to follow my heart, so to speak, or however Pollyannish that may sound. And so this is an image I took. Again, I wasn't the lead photographer. I was mostly just like a fly on the wall. So I was still kind of connected to those photojournalism and reporter type roots that I still had, but knowing that I was drifting further and further away from that. And so while I was in Miami, though, this fashion photography that I was doing, it was getting more conceptual. And for me, fashion photography, I love it, and it's still very influential in my work, but I wanted something more, or to create something more substantial. And so like this image is basically, I consider it a turning point for me, in that I really started to think about staging photography, right? Not just documenting it, and how I had control in constructing an image. And this was after a shoot one day, and I, again, wasn't the lead photographer, but the models were just standing around, waiting for everything to wrap up. And there was this porta potty there, and a split second idea, like, again, this idea of waiting, to use this porta potty, but then they're, dressed up to the hilt. And so again, a turning point in that idea of like constructing an image. Again, just some more fashion photography, but working with themes, but still more, again, like on the fashion side of it. Not, I don't consider these like fine art yet, for me anyway. This series, I did a series of like, what would Frida do, circa 2009, a modern, take on Frida. And again, more and more these more thematic shoots where there's a bit more, of a narrative behind it, and it's not just about clothing or makeup. Some of my influences, living in Miami, the colors, the pastels, the way the sun is, that light is very saturated. The shadows at certain times of day are just so beautiful. And I became really spoiled visually. And I think about artists like Andy Sweet. He was a photographer documenting Miami Beach in the mid 70s to early 80s, when it was a Jewish retirement community. And just again, that's nostalgia of Miami Beach before it became like the club scene. Another one of Andy's photos, again, just very sweet, a different take. And I had visited Miami as a child, but this is what I remember too. Living in Florida, even now, I'm not sure if Missouri gets these. Florida does. A sinkhole, you guys.
Not so much. I said not so much.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think it's quite the Florida phenomenon. And so, again, talking about that line of like danger and beauty, that's inherent in Florida, this idea of the sinkhole where the earth can open up really unexpectedly and basically swallow you up. And it has happened. A man was sleeping in his bedroom one night, east of Tampa, and a sinkhole opened up under his house, and they never recovered him, or his body. And so, this happens. It's rare, but it happens more often than not. And so, this was one, I think, a couple years ago, north of here, where it basically almost swallowed a whole street. Um, and so, again, that idea of the unseen danger, in Florida. I know different states have their unseen dangers, but I feel like ours is pretty great. Of course, hurricanes and, just alligators. This is a real photo of an alligator on an alligator float. Um, so even Florida alligators are stranger probably than other alligators. And lightning, we're like the lightning capital of the world. So again, um, just that idea of danger and beauty and this undercurrent that happens in the state is just something always in the back of my mind. Um, my work, I didn't really want to talk about my work in like this body of work and this body of work. And so I wanted to really look at it, kind of connecting them through, strategies that I'm doing quite often. So there's the obstructed and averted gaze. I realize that in all my work, I really love this tactic and employing it. And so I love this quote by Lewis Balks that the more that's seen, the less is revealed. He's an artist, and I believe that's true. I believe that, at least in my work or when I look at other people's work where there's an averted or obstructed gaze, it creates some mystery, it creates, uneasiness, and I really enjoy that. And I'll talk a little later about straight portraiture, but this tactic for me creates just more mystery, and I hope that when viewers look at my work that it also allows them to enter an image a little more easily, and create their own narrative for it. Um, I just love this image by the painter Gerhard Richter, Betty. I got to see it in person on, a trip to Paris at his retrospective. And when I saw the banner for it on the street before I, you know, saw the show, I thought it was a photograph. And then, learning that he based it on a photograph, but it's a painting, um, just blew my mind, just the quality of it. But just also, again, that averted gaze. I mean, the backstory on it, I think she was just looking at her father's paintings, but everything there, like that pose, the motion, just a fascinating, work to me. Images like Stephen Shore's Ginger, his wife, or, then girlfriend Ginger Shore. And this was taken in Tampa, which when I found out, of course, I love that. And so, just again, these images where someone's back is to us. Um, I love them. So this was from an early body of work that I did right before, I went to grad school, called the Burqa Project. And, coming off of like the, Afghan and Iraq wars, and all this talk about oppression, and especially like women wearing the burqa and veiling, I was just really interested in this idea of covering up, of veiling, of not being visible, and what that could mean. I'm not Muslim. 10 years out, looking back at this project, I realized that I did create it from, a place of privilege. But I look at these objects that I use in my work as more of metaphors. And so, um, is there power in, you know, being covered when you can see out, but the world can't see you? Um, Again, just things to think about. And also too, and sorry guys, someone's mowing outside the window of my studio. Can you hear it, Emily?
Just a little bit.
Oh man, sorry. Um, so this idea of like the fabric, how if you just wet it, it can be visible, what you're trying to hide or trying to cover. And so I like that basically just by wetting the fabric, it negated what the garment is supposed to do. It's negating its function. I also thought about the burqa um, in terms of its materiality. When wind hits it, it billows out. It almost becomes like a balloon. It has this floating quality. So a lot of times too, when I'm looking at these objects, whether it be like a porta potty or burqa, I'm thinking about these things that are typically loathed or hated, and can they be made beautiful? That's just a question I have. If you guys follow me, I'm not plugging it, but like on my Instagram, I have this little side project where I photograph trailers, mobile homes. And, you know, a lot of times there's this negative connotation with the trailer or who lives there. And so I'm just very much interested in that idea. Can you find beauty in something that's typically loathed or hated? Um, and so here I went again, just taking the burqas a little further, abstracting them, really focusing more on the materiality than the person underneath, and just what can these fabrics or materials do. Um, and I think that project, I mean, that was the first project where I really started, again, obstructing, covering people's faces. And so while I left that garment, the burqa behind, this just fed into everything else. I still liked what that tactic was doing for the work. So this is from my series, Confidence Tastes Like a Low Slung Cloud. This was my thesis project for graduation. And um, again, I was ruminating on these ideas of, you know, femininity, of not playing along with the rules, being somewhat rebellious, not being forthcoming. I grew up in a household, you know, I have a Latino Puerto Rican dad, very machismo. You'll learn about him a little later. A Caucasian mom who is, you know, just the sweetest, but, you know, those very traditional roles in the household of who wears the pants and who does what. And I've never aligned with those values my entire life. So I think, you know, some of my work is definitely pointing back to those feelings I have. Um, and also too, like with women, we're expected to be perfect. So I like to explore these ideas of failure or something wrong happening, going awry um, in my work. And so I think I think no matter um, you know, your upbringing, or I think everyone can, you know, connect with failing or messing up. Excuse me. So again, more from that series. And I definitely like in this series, location was important to me as well. And then now going into the motel project, Please Disturb. And this project, the genesis for this basically was not having, I was missing grad school. I was missing that camaraderie, going to a studio every day and talking about your work, you know, that sharing, that riffing off of one another. And I was just missing, yeah, the visiting aspect of it. And I thought there was a couple things that this project really tackled. It was that, it was creating work. I didn't have a studio after grad school. I just, yeah, like how do I make new work? And so I thought, well, I can get work done if I invite people to the motel and visit with them. So it's fulfilling, you know, these few different things. I can turn out a lot of work in a little bit of time, and that motel can become my location for a few days. And I started this back in 2015, and it's been such a rewarding project. I've gotten to meet a lot of different people. I started off knowing a lot of my subjects, but then through word of mouth, you know, I worked with people I had never even met. Like the first time I met them was, you know, when I opened my motel room door. And um, the places I choose are these old Florida motels, kind of mom and pop, mid-century motels that have some characteristics, you know, like this air conditioner with the rust coming out. And so I look for those details. I don't, again, like I mentioned before, um, the flaws to me, can they be beautiful? Can, you know, I love that. I'm not going to do a Hilton Garden Inn. They all look the same. I look for these places that have, um, you know, some of these aesthetics. The project also allowed me to work with um, people who weren't like my normal subjects in grad school. Most of the people in my photos were just the people I had access to. And so after grad school, I was able to work with, for example, older women, you know, and you know, using different body types. And I think working like with these women really got me thinking about, you know, that idea of representation in my work, not just representing one type of body or one type of age, basically. And so just to go back to like this idea of the motel, a lot of these motels, I mean, the ones you're seeing are still around, but it happens very often that they get demolished and condos go up or a high-rise hotel. And part of me, you know, another side benefit to this project for me has been documenting these places before they possibly disappear. To me, the architecture is so unique, the color palettes. Um, and also too with this project, the idea of the voyeur. So I wanted to include this quote by Helmut Newton. Any photographer who says he's not a voyeur is either stupid or a liar. Um, and so, you know, when people come to the motel room, I never know exactly what's going to happen. I mean, I'll have ideas for poses when the people arrive, but you know, they bring their own history and you know, character to the shoot, and they get to pick out the clothing or the props that I bring and utilize it in different ways. And so it's really exciting to see what happens. And sometimes I have to like kind of shake myself because I'll just kind of watch. I mean, I'll literally get into voyeur mode and not even click the shutter. And I have to remind myself, like, you need to make a picture, Selena. And so it's just a lot of fun to do that. And so like going back to this image that I started off with, again, I'm collecting these different outfits. Sometimes they're vintage, sometimes they're just see-through sauna pants. And I'll, you know, I don't force people. You know, I ask them what their comfort level is. Are they comfortable with semi-nudity or, you know, transparent fabrics? This woman, I wanted her to wear the pants, and she was happy with wearing the pants, but then I had the idea for the pose in mind, and I was kind of sneaky and manipulative about it. I asked her first if she did yoga, and she said yes. And then I asked her, can you bend over and touch your toes? And she said, sure. And so, you know, I had my process in mind to get her to do that, and she was fine with it. So it does surprise me in this project what people are willing or not willing to do. And even when they're not willing to do something, I think that's fine, because then it makes me work a little harder um, for us to come up with something. Um, I'll just let you guys look at the images for a minute. Um, Again, you know, sometimes I consider these like anti-portraits, but at the same time, I just love this idea of the figure in a space, whether it's a landscape or whether it's, you know, something like this, where I can combine the figure and the details of the motel. So this is a book that was written a few years back. It came from, I want to say GQ or a Playboy article way back when. But Gay Talese, a writer, he wrote this book called The Voyeurs Motel, based on a true story of the Manor House Hotel outside of Denver. And the motel owner built a viewing platform in the motel where he could look into all the rooms from the air vents. And so he kept a very detailed log of who was staying in what rooms, what sex acts they were doing. And, you know, it was mortifying reading this. And there's a Netflix documentary on it as well. After staying in so many motels and knowing that this happened. But again, just that idea of the voyeur, really fascinating. Um, So sometimes people just want to come into the room and rest. The motel project, again, opened my eyes. People, I think, felt that 1 or 2 hours with me was like a safe space. And sometimes I would hear like confessions, basically. One person told me that they had been to that same motel and had basically cheated on their spouse with someone at that hotel. And so again, the fact that they feel safe to tell me that, I'm very, again, honored that they feel safe in that space. I wanted to end talking about the motel project because I thought this was a good segue to the next project. So I don't always do like tons of kind of straight on portraiture, but I do enjoy it. And when I do, I feel like it's all the right, you know, ingredients were there to make a great image. And this was outside of a motel, and I had those are that's my outfit, the gloves. She brought her own shoes, but this idea where that I think it's like the welcome or hospitality pineapple. It's blocking her nether region. It's but she's very confrontational, and I love that about the image. And I didn't direct her too much. Again, I do direct on some level, right? Like poses, but then, she brought her own gaze to this. And I love that she was so confrontational. And it started making me think about, this idea of confrontation, of being direct. And so I took that last year. And so brings me now to my latest project. I'm still doing the motel project, but with COVID, obviously, that had to go on a back burner. So this project I'm working on now is I'm for now calling it Excess, and I'm turning the camera on me. And so I wanted to start off with saying, forget about the ideal male body, Michelangelo's David. I lived with this idea of the perfect male body growing up my whole life. My dad. My dad was a heavyweight boxer, and he fought George Foreman for the heavyweight title. He did not win it, unfortunately. Um, but I grew up just, with my dad exercising constantly, jogging every day. The school bus would drop me off in front of my house and he would be shadow boxing. It was mortifying. Shadow boxing is when the boxer just stands there by himself throwing punches. And when you're 12 years old, you want to die. And working out and all these things. And as a kid, I was just never interested in any of that. I was happy as an only child growing up to be alone in my room, um, writing, drawing, and none of that mattered to me. And so, in thinking about the idea of the body, it definitely goes back to my dad's relationship with his own body. Um, and then another thing that, again, I'm kind of laying the groundwork for how I got to this point and doing this new body of work. back in 2015, the video artist Caleb Lindsay asked me to be in one of his videos um, as a rich art patron. And again, I'm not normally in front of the camera. It's hadn't ever been of interest to me. But I thought, well, when Caleb Lindsay asks you, don't say no. It's going to be fun. His videos are fantastic. If you've never seen them, definitely check him out. And so that experience definitely primed me for being in front of the lens. And so I, like a lot of things, I don't jump right in, I dip my toes. And so um, I have this portrait of myself that a friend from grad school painted, Chalice Mitchell, fantastic painter. And I thought about, again, covering myself with this painting, with this representation of myself. And of course, now I think about Magritte, and this is not a pipe. And so this self-portrait with my portrait. And again, this idea of just being in the frame and what that means. And again, it started getting me to think about my body, my relationship with my body, my relationship with the camera. Um, the Venus of Willendorf, this um, little tiny sculpture, thousands of years old. And when I first saw this, I couldn't help but think, oh my God, she has my body. And so to think that this body shape has been around for millennia, um, it, I can't, sorry guys, I'm trying to figure out like, I mean, it was just so surprising to me. Not surprising, that's not the right word, but just um, that I wasn't so different, that I wasn't so strange. Because I've always had a large body. So to me, it's just what I've always lived and existed in. So again, not a big deal for me, but to see this, it made it a big deal. And so this is where I'm at right now, what I've been working on. So this project, it's been a lot of fun, but it's been difficult. Again, my normal process is photographing people and being behind the camera. Here I'm in the studio, um, just myself. I don't have an assistant, so it's me kind of running back and forth, getting the position correct, and then not, and then fixing it. And but it's been so great. I really love the experience of having to rely on myself. Um, and so in like thinking about this project, researching it, I fell in love with Derek Adams's work after a trip to Art Basel. But then reading up on it, it really blew me away. This idea of he paints these Black figures, these Black people floating in these, fantastical pool floats. And this idea of the Black body at leisure, but that it's a political act, that it's rebellious, right? Existing in this body, existing in this marginalized body is political or politicized. And just again, just existing or doing these acts, right, of leisure are like transgressive, basically. So I think about his work. I think about Genevieve Gagnard's self-portraits as different characters, and her work with identity. So these artists, giving me this fuel to work on my project. Um, and of course, I've been looking at how fat bodies have been represented in art, and when I use the word fat, to me, because I've had friends ask me about this, like using the word fat, and I feel like it's similar to the use of the word queer, that yes, it can be used in a derogatory way, but I identify as fat. Like that's just who I am. And so uh, using the word fat isn't negative to me. Like I'm a fat person. So I joke with my friends that like if someone were to come up to me like, you're fat, I'd say, wow, thanks, Captain Obvious. I mean, like, I know it's not new. And Oh, sorry about that. I was gonna put a quote. And this is that all looking involves risk. That's actually the title for that other image. But I wanted to read you from this great book. I don't know if you guys can see it. It's Feminism in Contemporary Art. Um, all looking involves risk to the voyeur as well as the person or object of the gaze. Part of the pleasure in scopophilia is derived from the threat or guilt involved in looking at what is culturally taboo. And gosh, I mean, it's weird to think about it, but like the fat body is culturally taboo, right? There's an industry spending billions of dollars, to not have this kind of body. So many media outlets, everyone, right? Like that's not an ideal body. So um, I find that fascinating. And I also am reading this book, Bodies Out of Bounds. Can you see it? Okay. I love the cover. It's Fatness and Transgression. And again, you guys, as like an 80s, 90s kid, I was just a fat kid, whatever, but I didn't know there was like theory on it and study and scholarly study. So, I mean, just even doing this project has opened opened me up to just these different courses of thought, and so it's been really eye-opening a lot of different ways, not only in what I'm capable of in creating this work, but what research is out there as well. And so i'm I'm playing with the idea of like abstracting my body, but I also like zooming out, like in that first image where you see more of the figure. um, so right now I'm in a back and forth, like, will they be all abstract? I'm not sure. Or will they be a mixture of the two? Um, but I'm having a great time with it. And I'll end here. This is from one of my favorite movies, The Florida Project. And I just love this little scene. Is it going to play? Is it playing? No?
Nope, not playing.
Oh, it's okay, you guys.
We still see the little girls in the rainbow though.
Oh, yeah, they're cute. I mean, if you haven't seen this movie, you guys, it's really fantastic. It's about, um, it centers around this little girl on the right who lives in this Florida motel right outside of like Disneyland, in Kissimmee. And it's just a great, you know, it's a great story, but also heartbreaking in some respects. All right. Um, I am happy to share any, or, field any questions from anybody or.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, before we take questions, thank you so much for sharing your work with us. That was awesome. I definitely there were some throwbacks that I remember seeing from grad school that was really nice to see again, and then a lot of new work that I haven't been able to see. All right, guys. Who has questions for Selina? Potentially about the work she's done in the past or the new work that she's freshly embarking on in 2020. I know we've got some photographers in the group, so let's open it up to questions for her. And feel free, if you don't want to turn your camera on, if you want to put it in the chat, I can vocalize it for you. Yeah. Come on, guys. Anyone? Mackenzie. I guess I'm a little bit curious. Sorry, I've got a dog trying to come on the other side of my webcam. I'm a little bit curious about the experience of moving from working collaboratively to this solo type of work, because with your fashion background, it seems like you were always working with other people around. So I'm interested to hear you speak a little bit more about what that transition was like, and maybe if it felt difficult when you first like
Oh,
segued
yeah.
into it.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest with everybody. One of the thoughts in the back of my mind was, who wants to see me? Right? Like, um, and but I think there was a little part of me that was, I guess jealous is the best word of, if I were to turn my camera around, like you could see like all of my racks of clothes that I collect, like sequins and bright colors.
Mhm.
Um, but they're sizes that I don't wear can get into. And I think there was a part of me that was like, I want to be in this vibrant world that I create for my subjects. Like I wanted to experience it too.
Mhm.
Um, and what that could look like. And, people who haven't seen the work but know I've been doing self portraits, some have asked, "Oh, are you doing nudity?" Um, and I said, "No." I mean, obviously, like Laura Aguilar has already done that and she does it beautifully.
Mhm.
There's another artist, Shug McDaniel, who documents, fat bodies in the nude. So I didn't feel like there was a need for me to do that. It's being done so well. But again, I wanted to keep with my aesthetic, the bright colors, the tights.
Well, and nudity, it doesn't seem like that necessarily is something that you've been doing with other people's bodies either. So
Right.
that potentially could have been a departure um,
Yeah. I mean, I'll
from
do
your aesthetic.
sometimes, yeah, like I'll do that. I do like the play with my subjects of um, nudity with like transparent
Mhm.
fabrics or, when fabric is wetted down or that kind of thing, to create
Mhm.
that contradiction. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's been great to just I feel like I've been more not that I wasn't meditative about my other work, but like when you're working with yourself and making the images, that is making me think about things a lot differently. Um, and how and my relationship to the camera. Still figuring it out, but it's been an exciting journey. And I think too, it's because I have to rely on myself so much. I don't have the I don't have the collaborator or like the subject to, you know, to give me that give and take. And so
Mhm.
there's nothing being volleyed back to me in this project in that I'm doing now with myself. And so I think that's been really eye opening in that regard. Just having to depend on myself as the, the photographer and the subject, and having that mesh all together.
All right, we've got a couple of questions in the chat from one of our photographers. I do a lot of self portraits as well, and I feel like my relationship with my body has changed a lot from that in many ways. And I guess I'm curious how your relationship with your own body is developing through your self portraits and how that is impacting your everyday life.
Oh, awesome. I think, like I can show you guys real quick, like if I turn my camera, like, so there's like one of the images like up in my studio next to the Derek Adams. Um, and so having this image up and seeing it every day that I'm here, I think it's really important to me, like just to be visible because and it doesn't have to be fat people. It could be anybody with like body, I think, issues or just having
Mhm.
relationships with our body. Um, I think it's important to see that every day because maybe some people like avoid the mirror or things like that. And so seeing it every day normalizes that for myself. Like, hey, this is who I am. Um, and, you know, this idea too that I've thought about a lot, I've heard people talk about it, that they think being fat or people think that being fat is a temporary thing. Like, you're always going to lose weight because the goal is to be thin. And so, what if that's not the goal? Then what happens? It's this like really weird question to ponder. Like, what if this is just who I am?
Mhm.
And so I think that definitely has like changed the relationship to myself and kind of also like relaxed me a little bit. Like, look, this is who I am. Like, I'm doing my best to be healthy, but if my shape or weight doesn't change, then that's just what it is, you know? Um, and so I think that's been like an interesting revelation in doing these self portraits, so to speak. And I even grapple, I don't know, like sometimes I grapple with the idea, like, is it really a self portrait or is it just, like Cindy Sherman, she doesn't call her portrait or she doesn't call them self portraits. She thinks she's a character.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I've even been questioning that about my work. I haven't resolved it yet, but are these really self portraits or is it just me as like an object or, in
Mhm.
the frame. So that's where I'm at, still figuring that out.
It's that's really interesting. We were me and my sculpture 2 class were actually having that same dialogue the other day about how women's bodies are either supposed to change intentionally to decrease in size, or we are supposed to stay exactly the same in order to maintain a size. And so our relationship with our bodies are so tortured,
Yes.
um, and weird. And so the idea of existing just as we are, and being pleased with that is
Right.
in itself a transgressive act.
Yes.
Like this is just me.
Wait, here it is. Sorry, guys. Emily, I had just a fantastic quote that I had taken it from the book. I kind of paraphrased it, but I had written it down in like my art journal. And it talks about basically that. I'll get to. Let's see. Women are supposed to take up as little space as possible because to be small is to be inferior to men.
Oh, damn.
I know. And I just thought, again, like reading a lot of this theory that's, it's woven into also feminist theory too.
Mhm.
Um, it's just been, yeah, I mean, it's really, it's really made me think about things a lot differently. And, I know if I get into a tight space somewhere, it's going to be tight.
Mhm.
But I never thought about it as being political or, just the idea of me taking up more space than I should have.
Or even thinking about like, okay, well, who designed those spaces then?
Right. I mean, it's a give and take because, and I think again, as a fat person thinking about these spaces that I inhabit, I grew up though with all those cultural, and I use it loosely, norms. So then I think, well, I am the problem. But in reading a lot of this theory, it's like, well, the problem, like you just said, could be in the design too.
Mhm.
It's hard because again, you grow up thinking this way, and then I'm reading like this research and different things that negates all that. So it's a lot of me going back to McKinsey's question too. It's a lot of me undoing all of that stuff just culturally and societally to like undo.
Yeah, I think that's great. We got another question from Patricia in the chat. How do you find slash invite people who come to the motel room?
I'm always looking for people who are willing to visit. So when I first started, it was people just kind of in my social circle that I knew. But then once they did it, they might, they thought, oh, I have a friend who would love this, or, she'd love to do this, or he'd love to do that. And then it just kind of kept growing organically that way. The women you saw, the older women lying on the bed, that was really interesting. I had partnered with a museum um, where I rented a room near to the museum, and they put the call out to like their museum patrons or community, and a lot of the docents like signed up right away. And a lot of the docents are like in their 60s, 70s, 80s. Like my oldest subject was 82 years old, and she was fantastic. And so that was really interesting in working again with people I had no prior relationship with at all. So, um, and again, I think that this comes from my journalistic roots. I like not knowing what's going to happen. I think that comes from, being a breaking news like beat reporter. And
Mhm.
so I love that idea of like, this could go anyway. This could be great. This could be bad. um, and so, yeah, so Patricia, if I'm in Missouri one day, will you model?
Please do. Please do. Come to Missouri. I was actually thinking about this because again, you and I went to USF together. We were there for I think 2 years
Mhm.
that we overlapped. And I'm like looking at all these photographs and recognizing a bunch of these models, just because they're mutual friends or acquaintances of ours. And I'm sitting here going like, how on earth did you and I never collaborate? Because
I know.
well,
Yeah.
I look at the work that I made post grad school, and I think I don't know. I think maybe a little bit of Selena Roman like
Oh,
festered in my brain, and like even made its way into some of the sculptural pieces that I work on
oh, wow.
now. Um, just because I think that idea of like seen and unseen was and voyeurism is something that a lot of us were playing around with in Florida.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. I mean, and I didn't mention it before, but also, for the 5 plus years I lived in Miami, I worked for a security and investigations company where, yeah, I know, like, what does that mean? So what that means is one of the main things they did is, they they would, sorry, like kidnappers paying ransoms. Like, I know you're not technically supposed to do that, but corporations have policies, like insurance policies. If one of their people in, Mexico or Colombia gets kidnapped, they call the company that I worked for to negotiate the ransom. But it's, I mean, you can Google the insurance company and it talks about it right there. But yeah, so when the government says we don't negotiate with terrorists, someone is. um, and all of my bosses were former CIA and FBI, clandestine people.
so
And so,
your childhood sleuthing came into
right,
play.
yeah, and so it was an amazing, fascinating job, to work there. But again, I think that also fed into my fascination with like surveillance and voyeurism, for sure.
Okay, so we got Jane Furco. As you said, that it brought to mind the time I saw a reunion of mermaids at Weeki Wachee Springs when I lived in Florida. They were all in their 60s and above. They would fit nicely
Wow,
into your work.
that sounds great. Yeah. I
Old school
actually
Weeki Wachee mermaids? Heck yeah.
totally. The other thing I've been interested in but haven't nailed it down yet is synchronized swimming. But I did go to a retirement community where they had synchronized swimming, and I took like these little short videos. I'll have to revisit that because I still have like the raw video, and it was fantastic. Like they were all decked out and they
Well,
were
I'll tell you right now, I've got one former student at Webster who is into swimming and mold making and art. So again, if you come
oh,
to
look at that.
Missouri, I
Yeah,
think we could, I mean, after it's safe,
right.
we can definitely set you up with some fun people. Well, are there any other final questions that we've got? I don't think so. I guess what I'll ask you to sort of end on is what advice would you give to students that now find their mechanisms or their ways of working having to change due to you know distance learning or a lack of collaboration or traditional collaboration being available? What advice would you give them?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is utilize maybe what you already know and what you're already using. I think of, social media and these digital platforms and ways of creating that could, I think people are starting to mine even more because we're isolating. Or just even the idea of distance.
Mhm.
Like, I've thought about, I'm ready to get back into shooting other people again, and what does that look like for me? I think that means just bringing a longer lens, and or just wearing a mask. But I definitely there's definitely things to explore. But I think the main thing is social media or like collaboration, right?
Mhm.
Over these digital realms.
I
I
think
think.
there's always going to be room for play.
Right, exactly.
Um,
And I think if this pandemic has taught me anything, it's like that it's given me time to do stuff. I mean, I know overall it's not positive, but I try to ferret out, some of the silver linings of these kinds of things. And
the perspective that you're forced to be in your studio more often.
that, but also at the same time, like to be easy on yourself if you're not creating, because there was a stretch where, and I'm sure maybe a lot of you or the students have felt this way, that creating just seems forced. And so, just follow your instincts if you're not ready to create something.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, if it's an assignment, you better do it. But just in general, like even after grad school, allow yourself that time to you know, just be, because sometimes when you're just still, then things make sense and will come to you.
Well, and it's often that's when the wheels are turning. You just don't recognize that they're turning. Um,
Exactly. Yeah,
like that's when you're coming up with your next big idea is when you're actually taking a break.
definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today and for sharing your work. And yeah, hopefully in the post-pandemic future, we will be able to set up some type of Missouri collab.
Yeah, maybe Missouri has some great motels.
Oh, we do. Oh,
Okay.
we do. All right. Well, thanks for giving us your time. And yeah, you have a good rest of the day. And
Thank
everyone,
you.
if any of you guys are in Art Forum, we're going to be doing our reading of our own original writing and hopefully manifesting the future at 2 o'clock. So I hope you log in. And everyone have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye, guys.
Bye.